One species that the Zorian Collective is known across the galaxy for is their ruthless efficiency in battle. Their empire was established through countless triumphant conquests, each campaign incorporating new resources and worlds into their ever-expanding dominion. The Zorian took immense pride in their strict adherence to conventional military strategies, refined over millennia. Their troops were flawless, their tactics meticulously planned, and their technology vastly superior to most other species. In every conflict, their invasions followed the same blueprint, a deliberate, overwhelming assault meant to crush any resistance before it could take shape. Their reputation for being nearly unbeatable often led to immediate surrenders from civilizations that knew what was coming. So when the Zorian decided to target Earth, they viewed humanity as nothing more than another primitive species, easy prey requiring little effort to subjugate. To them, humans appeared chaotic, technologically inferior, and reliant on outdated military tactics. The Zorian leaders anticipated a swift and decisive victory, assuming humanity would fold the moment they unleashed their power. When the invasion began, Earth seemed like an easy target. A massive fleet of Zorian warships arrived, unleashing a relentless barrage meant to instill panic and force an immediate surrender. The Zorian commanders watched in satisfaction as their vessels broke through Earth's atmosphere, confident that their overwhelming show of force would bring humanity to its knees. Ground forces were deployed strategically, striking key cities and military installations with pinpoint accuracy. Everything went according to plan, at first. The Zorians saw minimal resistance, reinforcing their belief that victory was imminent. They prepared for the final blow that would cement their control over Earth. But then, something unexpected happened. Rather than the organized surrender they anticipated, the Zorian encountered something far more chaotic: anarchy. Human forces reacted in ways that defied the Zorian understanding of warfare. Instead of retreating or submitting, they engaged in seemingly reckless, nonsensical attacks. Their tactics were erratic, their movements unpredictable, and their assaults relentless. They struck from unexpected angles, employed unconventional strategies, and used hit-and-run tactics that threw the Zorian military into disarray. The Zorian, accustomed to disciplined and methodical combat, found themselves struggling to adapt. Every time they thought they had humanity's strategy figured out, the humans did something completely unexpected. The Zorian were forced to constantly reassess their approach, and for the first time in centuries, their confidence began to waver. What they had dismissed as human incompetence turned out to be humanity's greatest strength: adaptability. Unlike the structured, rigid invasions the Zorian had perfected, humans embraced disorder. They refused to fight on the enemy's terms. Instead of direct confrontations, they relied on guerrilla warfare, sabotage, and psychological ambushes. Mobile units struck quickly before disappearing into the terrain, disrupting supply lines and severing communication networks. To the Zorian, this was chaos. To humanity, it was strategy. The disciplined, rule-bound Zorian military found itself, completely outmaneuvered by an enemy that played by no rules at all. The longer the battle raged, the clearer the difference became. While the Zorian clung to their rigid doctrines, humanity adapted. The Zorian relied on procedure, expecting their technological superiority to crush all opposition. But in the chaos, their reliance on predictable tactics became a weakness. Human forces, on the other hand, thrived in the madness. They shifted tactics in real time, exploiting every vulnerability and turning the Zorians' own strategies against them. What the Zorian saw as disorder was, in reality, calculated innovation. The Zorian leaders, once certain of their supremacy, began to doubt themselves. The longer the war dragged on, the more their frustration grew. What should have been a swift conquest had turned into a drawn-out, costly nightmare. Their strategies were failing, their technological edge rendered useless by an opponent that refused to play by the rules. As the battle raged, desperation set in. The Zorian, a species that had never known defeat, now faced an enemy they had vastly underestimated. Humanity refused to break. Every setback only made them more determined. Every loss became a lesson that strengthened their defense. Communities united, resistance spread, and the spirit of defiance ignited across the planet. The Zorian had expected an easy victory. Instead, they had waged war against an opponent that simply would not be conquered. Human forces turned the tide through sheer resilience and unconventional warfare. Guerrilla tactics became the norm, with small, mobile units launching ambushes before vanishing into the shadows. Civilians set traps, used deception, and transformed urban landscapes into battlegrounds. Even cyber warfare was unleashed as human. Hackers infiltrated Zorian communication networks, spreading misinformation and throwing the invaders into chaos. Despite appearing disorganized, these tactics were devastatingly effective. The Zorian war machine began to crack. Supply lines were severed, morale collapsed, and confusion spread through the ranks. The disciplined Zorian forces, so used to fighting predictable enemies, found themselves overwhelmed by an enemy they could neither understand nor outmaneuver. Their greatest weakness had been exposed. While they fought with precision, humanity fought with creativity, and in the end, creativity won. As these unconventional tactics persisted, the Zorians started to show signs of success. Indications of desperation in their custom strategies that had helped them win numerous other campaigns, were faltering against an adversary that did not follow their rules. They became alarmed upon realizing they were losing control of the situation. Their previously coordinated efforts turned unpredictable as they attempted, and failed, to adapt to the rapidly evolving circumstances on the ground. In a desperate bid to regain control, the Zorian leadership mandated more proactive strategies, such as indiscriminate scorched earth tactics and relentless bombardments. Yet these acts only increased confusion, further alienating them from the human populace and making their defeat all the more likely. At the lowest point of the invasion, the tide began to shift firmly in humanity's favor. Outwitted at every opportunity, the invaders found themselves incapable of gaining traction on Earth. Their losses mounted, and as human forces gained confidence, every victory began to turn the tide against the once dreaded Zorian army. Demoralized and fragmented, the Zorian forces struggled to reorganize in the face of unrelenting human assaults. When humanity exerted pressure, it became evident. The Zorian had lost. The conditions were set for a final, desperate stand, but it was too late. Their campaign, once envisioned as a swift eradication of an inferior species, had instead become a disastrous failure. The phrase, "victory was out of reach," hit them like a heavy blow. Weeks of constant pressure had exhausted them. They found themselves incapable of holding on to the lands they had so assuredly invaded. Their highly advanced technology and carefully calculated tactics had failed to achieve the resounding victory they had anticipated. The unpredictable nature of human strategy had shattered their morale and destroyed their self-assurance. Zorian commanders, who once believed in their own invincibility, now faced the brutal truth. Their invasion had collapsed into disaster. Reports of continued failures and mounting casualties flooded their central command. Eventually, they had to acknowledge the inevitable. Further efforts would only lead to complete annihilation. The decision to withdraw was made, but execution was chaotic. What had once been a synchronized military machine was now disintegrating in panic. Orders to retreat were issued, but miscommunication and confusion plagued the operation. The once formidable invaders, now desperate to escape, scrambled for survival. Under heavy fire, the Zorian lifeline, its retreating forces, was being rapidly dismantled. Desperation defined their withdrawal. Entire units abandoned their posts, soldiers deserted, and a once orderly army became a fragmented mass of fleeing warriors, all struggling to reach the safety of their ships in orbit. Humanity seized the opportunity. What had started as a defensive war now became an unrelenting offensive. Civilians, resistance fighters, and organized military units pursued the retreating aliens. The heavens echoed with the roar of human aircraft as they hunted down Zorian vessels. On the ground, human forces ambushed and struck at every turn, ensuring no escape was without cost. What was meant to be a retreat turned into a massacre. The Zorian, once terrorizing Earth from the skies, now found themselves hunted, torn apart by the very species they had underestimated. Their final stand came at their last evacuation stronghold. With their backs against the wall, the remnants of their once mighty army dug in, preparing for the inevitable. The battle was fierce, but the outcome had already been decided. Human soldiers, now fighting with the certainty of victory, overwhelmed the alien defenses. The Zorian were exhausted, unable to mount an effective counterattack. One by one, their positions fell. Their last stand crumbled under the relentless human assault. Those who survived had no choice but to flee, leaving behind their dead and the shattered remains of their failed invasion. The Zorian retreat was total. Their campaign on Earth had come to a catastrophic end. Once confident in their superiority, the Zorian leaders now faced the harsh truth of their failure. In the aftermath, they gathered to understand what had gone so horribly wrong. Their reflections were filled with disbelief and a newfound, reluctant respect for humanity. They had relied on tried-and-true strategies, convinced that discipline and advanced technology would ensure victory. Instead, they had faced an opponent that defied everything they understood about war. Humanity, seemingly chaotic and uncoordinated, had outmaneuvered them at every turn. The very traits the Zorian had dismissed, human adaptability, resilience, and unpredictability, had been the key factors in their downfall. With this realization came an even greater fear.